Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Meet the Candidates Forum for the New York's 44th Senate District Democratic Primary. There are two candidates on the ballot. Both candidates were invited and both accepted the invitation. This event was organized by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga and Schenectady counties. It will be recorded and posted on the League's website. League rules require that if a candidate forum is recorded, it must be broadcast or rebroadcast in its entirety. My name is Linda McKenney, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. I live in Gansevoort, and I will be your moderator tonight. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, volunteer, political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. That has been League policy since 1920. Membership is open to anyone 16 and over, so please consider joining your local league. We have received questions from the public in advance. These questions were reviewed by League members and selected to be representative and to avoid redundancy. Questions of a personal nature are never included. Neither candidate has seen the questions before tonight. Candidates, this is your opportunity to let voters know your stance on these topics and how you will address the issues facing this community. Candidates have been asked to address substantive issues. Personal attacks are prohibited. No interrupting, no bad language. During closing statements, candidates have been asked to not challenge their opponents directly or indirectly, as there will be no opportunity for rebuttal. The League may remove a closing statement from the recording to address violations of guidelines. Closing remarks are intended to present each candidate's platform and outline their intended goals. We have a timer for this evening's event, who will be seen by the candidates on screen. The timer will hold up signs for the candidates to glance at to let them know how much time they have left. A dark blue means you have 1 minute left. Yellow means 30 seconds left. And red means stop. Time is up. If you continue to speak, you will be interrupted. The names of the two candidates for New York's 44th Senate District Democratic Primary are, in alphabetical order, Patrick Nelson and Sarah Rogerson. Now it's time to hear their 2-minute opening statement. And we've drawn lots to determine the order. And the first to speak is Patrick. Time will start when you start speaking.
Good evening, and thank you for being a part of this process. I know what it is to struggle and face challenges. 4 years ago, I was a DoorDash delivery driver, struggling to make ends meet. I've scooped your ice cream at Stewart's. I have been a retail worker. I've been a summer worker at the track, trying to cobble together enough income to keep my head above water. I live where most of us live, which is only a few missed paychecks from a personal financial tragedy. And it is because of this, you recognize that the proper response to struggle is to say, I'm going to leave it better for the next person. It's not that I struggled, therefore you should too. It is I struggled, so I am going to make it better off for you. So it's because of this that I have dedicated my life to public service and leaving our community better and stronger for the next generation. Now, we face real challenges in our communities, and we have systems that are not built for us. We need to guarantee healthcare as a right for everybody. We need to tackle climate change, regulate AI, and keep our communities and make our communities affordable for everyone so that folks can continue to live here. To achieve these ends and to address a number of local concerns, we need to beat Senator Jim Tedisco this November. And I would submit to you humbly that as a progressive Democrat, who has served in a very Republican community successfully, faithfully, and effectively, and as a former state Senate candidate who, despite running during hardship, had the highest vote share and the most votes of any Democrat looking to represent Saratoga County when I ran in 2020, I would submit to you that I am that candidate that gives us the best chance to win this election in November and to achieve the goals that we all share here as Democrats. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And Sarah, now we'd like to hear from you.
Terrific. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone in Zoom land, for participating. These types of forums are really, really important and increasingly rare in this political climate. And it's really, really laudable that the League spends so much effort and is dedicated to making sure that these conversations happen. I'm running for state Senate because I love my community. And when you love something, you fight for it with everything that you have. And I've been fighting for this community and others for my entire career as a public interest lawyer, as an immigration advocate, as a housing advocate. I've been, as the first lawyer in my family, fighting since I got there, really. And I put myself through law school and working primarily in the service industry. And along the way, I found a way to dedicate a career in service of others. So I'm also running because I'm a mom. Decisions are made in Albany all the time about women's bodies without women in the room. In 2026, this has to stop. I have built my career on making sure that people who are most directly impacted by the policies being considered are in the room for those discussions. And this is the kind of new leadership that we need in Albany and the kind of leadership that I represent. I've been relentless in my fight for working families, immigrants, and tenants, and I'll be relentless in fighting for you if you trust me with your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Now it's time for questions. So, candidates, you have up to 1.5 minutes to respond to a question, and you are not required to respond. You may pass if you wish. Each candidate will be allowed 2 opportunities to request an additional minute during this question and answer session for a rebuttal or to expand on your answer. Please hold up your hand and wait to be acknowledged by me before you begin your extra minute. This can only be done during the Q&A session. It may not be used for your closing statement. Remember not to interrupt each other. The timer and I will keep track of the number of extra minutes used. And the questions will be directed to the candidates in rotation so that each one of you gets a chance to respond first. Feel free to ask me to repeat questions as needed. So the first question is going to go to Sarah. And here it is. The proposed New York Health Act would create a single-payer health system, providing comprehensive health care for all New Yorkers to be paid for with progressive state taxes. As supporters of the act, what do you see as the obstacles to its passage, and what steps would you take to get it passed?
So I'm very honored to be designated as a healthcare champion by the folks who are advocating for the passage of the New York Health Act, which has been a heavy lift for those folks. But what's really important about the New York Health Act, too, is that everybody is covered for everything, including long-term care and dental and other things that are seen as expensive supplements. So ensuring that mega health corporations are not profiting off of our bodies is really important. There are some obstacles to getting it passed. I think the biggest one is political will, but also the details. It's really important as a state senator to be so focused on the details so that you can be held accountable to your constituents when they have detailed questions about how this will work, what the progressive tax entails, what it actually covers, and how to access the services available. I want to make sure, too, that we're focused on prevention in terms of early detection and really making sure that we're focused on primary care as well. while we were waiting and pushing for the Health Act. So I think that this session will make a lot of progress toward that end. And I know that the advocates have been working very hard to make sure that that happens.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick, would you like me to repeat the question?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
So this is an area that absolutely requires paying attention to the details. So let's get into a few of those details about why there are barriers. I was a staffer in the New York State Assembly in 2017 when this actually passed the Assembly. This was one of those bills that Democrats said, give us the Senate and we'll give you this bill. And then activists went and created a Democratic majority in the New York State Senate, and all of a sudden the bill cannot get out of committee. So there are cynical forces that are holding this back, but there are also real concerns. One is that it is really a prescription for the governor to create a program. It doesn't outline things as specifically as possible. You have public sector unions that are concerned that they have given up pay raises for their members in lieu of healthcare, and now are they going to be made whole when we buy everyone into a system that's as good as the healthcare they bargained for? I will say in my last state Senate race, CSEA and PEF did not support the New York Health Act. I supported it firmly, but they still supported my campaign. I believe I am the kind of candidate and senator who can bridge that gap and move this forward. That's one of the reasons why I, too, am honored to be designated as a healthcare champion by the Campaign for New York Health, who I've worked with hand in hand over the years with advocates like Scott DeNoyers, who we had at our town hall in Saratoga Springs, who talked about the tragic loss of his son, Danny, because of insurance malfeasance. We need to make sure there's no more Danny DeNoyers in New York and ideally in the United States in the future. And that's why I am seeking a seat on the New York State Health Committee in the New York Senate. I've already talked to Senator Rivera about it, using my background as both a biochemist and someone who works in the healthcare industry. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. And you're up first for the next question.
Thank you.
Our immigrant neighbors are living in fear of ICE, and all of us are threatened when federal agencies aren't upholding due process. What would you do to protect both immigrants and the rule of law?
Well, this is where New York can be proud of itself in defending our legacy as a state of immigrants, the home of Ellis Island, where my Irish refugee ancestors came fleeing the Great Hunger. We are banning partnerships between ICE and local law enforcement. We're banning masks. We're creating civil accountability for ICE officers when they violate constitutional rights of our neighbors. This doesn't solve every problem. There are data sharing concerns that need to be dealt with. There are informal agreements, but we made great strides in this budget, and we need to use those tools. I have worked with asylum seekers in helping do credible fear screening so that folks can stay in this country. I have volunteered with my wife at the Saratoga backstretch with the immigrant workers to make sure they have bikes that work, because they use them to get around Saratoga Springs as part of the backbone of our economy in this county. So I have committed myself to supporting our immigrant neighbors, not as strongly as my opponent, but this is her career. So I will say that she is stronger than me on this issue. I am not weak on it, and I am ready to stand up and protect our immigrant neighbors. If that includes being like Brad Lander in New York City and putting my body between them and harm, I am prepared to do so.
Thank you, Patrick. Sarah, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay.
Thank you, though. So I have practiced immigration law ever since the very first case that I ever had the pleasure of representing someone on, which was in law school. My very first client was from the Republic of Congo. He was an elected official. And the night before his final prep for his interview, he actually took hold of a podium and gave a speech in his own language, just to remember what it was like to be able to live under that democracy. And it really, really shaped me and formed me. When I studied for the New York bar exam, I found out that he passed his asylum interview. And the scales of justice were gleaming at this law school. The sun was shining. It felt like a calling. And it very much has been. I also came to this work through my faith. My father's a Lutheran minister, and I worked with the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service since before I went to law school. But the biggest thing that we need to do, I mean, a lot of the things that passed, I had a hand in, either academically or in the streets or working with coalitions to get passed. But the biggest thing that we can all do is continue to bust myths. And one big one is that crime increasing crime is linked to increase in immigration. Right-leaning organizations like the Cato Institute have debunked this with social science, saying that when immigrants come into your neighborhood, crime rates actually decrease. And that's the type of conversation that I like to have about immigration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Excuse me. So you are up first for the next question. What can the legislature do to ensure human rights protections for all New Yorkers, especially marginalized people, in the face of federal government attacks? How would you work on that?
Sure. So in New York, there is this phenomenon at times where we talk a big game, but we don't fund our values. Budgets are moral documents. The budgeting process, when it includes things that legislate rights, must be backed up by dollars. So, in the case of gender affirming care for trans kids, for example, we talk a big game about how we value that. And we do in New York. New York is a safe haven for trans kids and for people seeking reproductive justice and access to reproductive care, right? But we need to back that up with budget dollars that are reflective of the need. Make sure that we are following up our commitments with the dollars and cents, with the commitments that are required to actually get it done, and also signaling to these groups that New York is actually a safe place, which means on a hyper-local level, rooting out bias and discrimination wherever it occurs, whether it's at the public library, with people advocating to restrict reading materials, or anywhere else that you see it in our communities.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
Yes, and we should be proud to be New Yorkers. I've said to people, this is a state where at least I know I am free and we are free. We have an Equal Rights Amendment. We have the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act. We have marriage equality, and we stand up for freedom and liberty for all, and we must not back away from those rights. In fact, we need to be doubling down. And I agree with a number of things that were just brought up. We do need to be funding access to care that helps people live a true and complete life. We need to make sure that we're not backing away from those commitments. I also believe that as the 8th largest economy in the world, we need to be using our dollars, not just moral documents internally, but also externally, with vendors from states that deny the fundamental human right to reproductive control. We should be looking at whether or not we can find other vendors, whether we can find other textbook suppliers to make sure that New York's money is being spent in places that honor our true fundamental American values.
Thank you, Patrick. And you're up for the next question. Do you support the Packaging and Recycling Infrastructure Act? If yes, what are the biggest hurdles to getting it passed in the next legislative session? And if no, please explain.
Yeah, so this is a challenge where we're trying to reduce plastics, which we're understanding more and more are a great threat to our health. They are endocrine disruptors. They are causing issues with infertility and other issues, along with forever chemicals like PFAS, PFOAs, PCBs that have been the product of industrial activity in much of upstate New York. So yes, I support curtailing that. I believe there is a ton of pressure from lobbyists from the plastics industry that does not want to see this done. Additionally, we need to be going further. There are other proposals to look at class-based regulation for PFAS, not just picking 13 chemicals here and there, but taking more of an approach like the FDA does, which is dangerous until proven safe, rather than safe until proven dangerous. And you can trust me to keep this commitment because I have always been free of corporate contributions, lobbyist contributions. I am only here to work for the people of this district and protect our health.
Thank you, Patrick. Sarah?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of having a number of conversations with Judith Enck, who is such a strong advocate on this issue on the roundtable on WAMC, which was actually really good preparation in retrospect for forums like this, hashing out our beliefs on public radio funded by the public. But yeah, I would definitely support this act. It was disheartening to see the last minute push by lobbyists in New York to block this, given all that we know about the healthcare risks of the plethora of plastics that seem to seep into every single corner of this state and this country. Another important thing to remember is that upstate New York, in particular, in this district, including this district in Buffalo, are places that people consider climate havens for the future or climate resilient areas. And the last thing that we want to do is create a problem where one doesn't exist. So I would support this act and many others that keep us a climate haven, a desirable place to live, because we're able to reduce the amount of harmful chemicals, waste, plastics, and other elements that would seep in to our communities and make us sick.
Thank you, Sarah. And the next,
Like,
Patrick, do you want another
Yeah, I'd like to
minute?
take another minute
Okay,
on
hold
this.
just a second. Let me make sure that Janet's ready to time you for another minute. You all set?
Yes.
Go ahead, Patrick.
As a local representative of one of the communities that was hit hardest by the pollution from General Electric, that cost us our water plant, made us reliant on county water, and left a community like mine that we didn't know we were drinking PCB-laced water for the first 18 years of my life. We also need an effective senator who stands up to things like PFAS burning that's happening in Fort Edward, where the smoke can get over into the town of Moreau and land on fields and land in water sources. We are potentially a climate haven. But we need to be making sure that we are preserving and protecting all of our natural resources throughout this region so that we can actually be a haven and have fresh, drinkable water and other fundamental resources. This district has done enough and taken enough damage from pollution. It should never happen here again.
Okay. So Sarah, you're up next. What more can New York do to protect us from gun violence? What additional protections do you feel are most important?
So some people here might know that my nephew is a surviving victim of the Oxford, Michigan school shooting. That incident plunged our family deeply into this issue on a number of fronts, in terms of community gun violence overall, not just the targets, the mass shootings that happen in primarily in schools and other more sheltered spaces. The biggest thing here that my sister and I have been talking to all kinds of groups about, including an invitation to the National Sheriff's Association conference to talk with law enforcement about, is responsible gun ownership and safe storage. Safe storage protects lives. It's the number one killer of unsecured firearms, and firearm related deaths are the number one killer of children. Safe storage goes very far to curb that. It also attacks the suicide rate that climbs and climbs with firearms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
So, as a member of the Stillwater Rod and Gun Club, which is a gun club that was founded by my great-grandfather, Percy Aldrich, I'm still pleased to be considered a gun sense candidate by Everytown for Gun Safety, and believe we've got an opportunity to bridge this divide. I can remember when a dear friend of our family, Chris Camuso, lost his life at the wrong end of an AR-15 many years ago, and he was my age. Domestic dispute, and he's no longer here with us. Used to play in a band with him, and I learned to play guitar. His father played drums. It is tragic for every one of these losses. I'm going to agree that I think safe storage is an area where we need to focus. It's also an area where I think we might be able to bridge some of the divide, because safe storage is really important. It can also be very expensive. Sometimes more expensive than the firearms and the ammunition themselves is the means to store them safely so that people that shouldn't have them and children don't get their hands on them. So I'd like to work within the New York State Senate to find a way to use tax credits or incentives at the point of sale, work with folks in the community to find a way to make sure that we're not only requiring safe storage, but we're also making it accessible to everyone. Because these are things that happen privately, right? Like, we're not going around to everyone's home to make sure they have a proper safe or a proper case in their basement. But But if we make it affordable and accessible and the easiest possible option, that means more of these firearms are going to be locked up. And that means fewer people will face a tragedy like Chris Camusa did in Mechanicville.
Sarah, would you like an extra minute to
Yes,
talk about
please.
this? Just give us a second till
Sure.
Janet gets ready. Okay, you're a go.
So this is another thing that I didn't know that Patrick and I have in common. I took a pistol permitting class at the Clifton Park Rod and Gun Club long before my nephew was involved in community gun violence. And I did that because I had just finished representing the International Association of Chiefs of Police in a brief to the United States Supreme Court on an issue that would restrict firearms access to keep firearms away from those who commit misdemeanor domestic violence offenses, an issue that is perennial, unfortunately. And so I have a demonstrated track record, not just in the recent history with my own personal experience, but almost my whole career. And when I was on the school board, I was really, really proud to put Be Smart for Kids into our back to school programs so that all parents can talk to each other, no matter what their political background is, about this issue.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And so Patrick, you're up next. What do you see as the most important knowledge areas, skills, and experience you would bring to the Senate, and what standing Senate committees do you hope to be assigned to?
Yes. So I think one of the most important knowledges and experiences that I bring is coalition building, finding ways to bring people together around projects like we did for our EV charger project here in the village of Stillwater, where it was our conservative village, our entirely Republican-led town, and actually the Diocese of Albany that all had to get on the same page to cite this in the most effective way. And then we've moved forward towards becoming a climate smart community as a result of it. So bringing people together, even if we don't agree on everything, agreeing to work on one issue. I am trained in the sciences. I'm a biochemist by training. I'm pleased to be endorsed by 314 PAC, which works to elect scientists. I work with AI researchers in my day job on a daily basis, and I bring in expertise in artificial intelligence, and how we regulate artificial intelligence after this data center moratorium is going to be a key issue in the next legislative session, and we need more legislators with hands-on experience to help write those regulations to protect each of us. I would seek a seat on the Health Committee based on my background as a biochemist and someone who works with the pharmaceutical and biotech industries in my day job. And I would also absolutely have to seek a seat on racing and wagering because it's in the essential economic interest of this district, being Saratoga County with Saratoga Racecourse. We always, always, always need to have a seat at that table to make sure that our interests are heard when decisions are being made about racing. So those two committees are essential. I would also look at small villages, small cities, because of Schenectady, Mechanicville, and Saratoga Springs, or towns and villages because of our vast rural community and my experience in local government.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Sarah?
One of the things that's so great about running in this district and living in this district is the variety of people that we get to represent. Over 330,000 different people with vastly different interests in some cases. I have put some thought into this. There's of course a pecking order, and there's all sorts of like inside baseball that happens. And if either Patrick or I were to prevail, we would be junior members. So there's a lot that goes into this. But certainly racing, gaming, wagering, and hand in hand with that, cultural affairs and parks. Other issues that I've been touched personally with in conversations with constituents include veterans, homeland security, which I know a little bit about, and military affairs. A number of my family serve in the military as well. Higher ed, because that's what I've been doing with my life for the last 18 years. And women's issues, of course, children and families. And last but not least, I've talked with a lot of small business owners, and I am acutely aware of what's happening on Main Street and how the economic crisis and the affordability issues are squeezing our households and also our small businesses. So I'd be interested in any of the other 30 so committees, but those are my current areas of interest.
Thank you, Sarah. And the next question is for you. This year's budget was very late. Was the lateness harmful, or do you believe that the policy outcome made it worthwhile?
Every year, I am focused on the budget, not only because it is supposed to be out by my birthday, and I always take a point of personal privilege of feeling like somehow it's a gift, but also because year after year, I advocate for funding for the immigration law clinic, which is one of the first in our region that I advocated for. By going door to door in the legislative office building with a one pager, because I figured that's just how you do it. Eventually, the law school found a pro bono lobbyist who was able to help me do it correctly. But I ended up learning a lot from that experience. And our funding is in what's called the aid to localities budget, which are member items. Um, and to get to the point on timeliness, every delay, I've seen it myself. The budget was still delayed when we were supposed to have a site visit at the law school about our funded program. It backs up everything, right? It makes it harder and harder for the state to do its business. We need to find every avenue possible to make sure that we get this budget back on time. And whatever that looks like, I would spend between now and January trying to figure it out. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
So the governor said that she would rather a late budget than a bad budget. In this situation, we got both a late and a bad budget. And being late is harmful. One of the signature issues of our campaign is enshrining the right to talk to a human being and have the decisions that affect our lives be made by human beings and not algorithms. And I was trying to sell Senator Gustavo Rivera on this and maybe introducing it. And he said, we're just not going to have time after the budget. And that we did not have time for other non-budget legislative issues. And that means so many things that we should have been dealing with did not get time when we ended in June. The immigration wins are spectacular, but one of the areas that I think is embarrassing is that we had the longest government shutdown led by two Congress members from New York, Senator Chuck Schumer and Congressmember Hakeem Jeffries, over expanded ACA tax credits to keep people on their health care. It was so important to the Democratic Party that we shut the government down for the longest period of time. And I supported it because I thought it was the right thing to do. Now, when New York State had the ability to make sure that for the New Yorkers that were going to be hurt by those cuts, we could have backstopped them. There are still 450,000 New Yorkers, almost 10,000 in our district, that are facing healthcare loss on July 1 because this Democratic-led state failed to backstop an issue that was so important that Democratic leadership had the longest government shutdown in American history over. It makes us look hypocritical. It makes it look like political theater. And I believe we need to protect people's health care.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And the next question is for you. How would you reach out to your colleagues across the aisle to find solutions to issues that affect all New Yorkers?
Well, in the same way that I have to this point. And it's multiple aisles because the New York State Senate is not just Democratic and Republican. You have a Republican conference. You basically have a DSA conference from New York City. You have an upstate conference. You have all these different little groups that tend to work together. And you have to put at least 33 votes together, ideally 34, because the leader's not going to bring anything to the floor that only passes by one vote. So you have to get a coalition together to bring something to the floor. So it's recognizing this about how the Senate breaks down and the different interest areas that each group has that you work to build coalitions, just like we've done here in Stillwater. One of the reasons that I am a productive elected official in a community that does not share my state or national politics is because I find a way to agree with people on something and get it done. I have built the trust in people that when I say, I want to do this with you, they believe me. They understand that I am not a cynical operator. I play it straight, cards on the table. This is what I believe. And if we can work together on something, let's find a way to do it. Because at the end of the day, it is not about my career or your campaign or anything else. At the end of the day, we are measured by our people's lives in this state and in our communities made better off by the service that we get to do. And I have always aimed to do that.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Sarah?
Yeah, I feel like I prepared my entire life for this. I grew up in the rural Midwest, in a predominantly conservative family. I went to a predominantly conservative / libertarian college in undergrad. And have honestly really enjoyed and kind of at first hid my political leanings in part with my hockey family, just because I know people want to talk about issues. They don't want to talk about politics and they don't want it in their face necessarily. So I bonded with my hockey families around issues. And then I came out either as an immigration law professor, which raised questions, or other things, as more than my identity as a mom and a hockey mom, and found really rich opportunities to have these conversations. And I'm still in conversation with a lot of family members that I disagree with as well. So from Thanksgiving table to tailgate debates, this is something I've been practicing over and over and over again. I also had the pleasure of serving on the school board during the pandemic. Lots of difference of opinions around vaccinations, when, why, how it intersected with sports. There were so many issues that we were wrestling with at the time. And so I really got some on the ground practice. And then day to day, talking about immigration, there's so much that brings people together around that issue. And I'm eager to find more issues that we can come together on.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And you're up next. How is your campaign working to energize disenchanted citizens, and how would you convince them to vote?
I am excited by this question and this opportunity. People are coming out of the woodwork. When we knock door to door, sometimes it's not a Democratic household that we bump into, or we bump into somebody along the way that's asking like, "Hey, what are you doing in the neighborhood?" And we have an opportunity to talk with them. And what I'm saying is that people are eager for a new way of doing politics. They want to talk about issues and not um, stay entrenched in the rhetoric that's quite frankly divisive and in a lot of cases harmful in our current political climate. So I've had people say to me regularly in my inner circle too, social circle, because I'm new, relatively new to running for this level of office. I'm not a career politician. And so in talking about the decision to run, it really brings these out. And what people have reflected back to me is, well, hey, we may not agree on everything, but you're a reasonable person. I feel like I can trust you, or I know I can trust you because we worked on a common issue like getting goalie equipment into the hands of people who maybe can't afford it this season. And so these are the types of things that bring people together. These are the types of conversations we need to be having more often. Forums like this help us do that when done correctly. And I'm eager to have more and more of those conversations as the campaign moves through the primary.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
One of the reasons I've been able to serve as I have served the public to this point is that I have demonstrated over my time in public service, whether it's a Democratic state committee or local government, that I believe that right and wrong is more important than red and blue. And so I've had to take tough stances in the past against my own party because I believed it was the right thing to do when it was Andrew Cuomo sexually harassing in the workplace or covering up deaths in nursing homes. And what I can say is that in my community and the people that I speak to, that earns their respect because they understand that you have a moral backbone and you will put that first and not just be a rubber stamp for a party, which is why people are so disenfranchised in the first place. Another area where we're trying to reach out to folks is just by being real, being a human being. We did an ad where I was holding one of our chickens and it went really well. So we did another one. I'm not afraid to, I take these issues incredibly seriously. I don't take myself all too seriously. I know I can be a little bit goofy, but I'm trying to let that out. I'm trying to be vulnerable with the community and show people 360 degrees who I am as a complete person, talking about my struggles financially and being on Medicaid and delivering takeout to make ends meet and not trying to cover that up because I feel like it cheapens me or something. So sharing vulnerability in my own history gives people the opportunity to share that with us. We had a town hall last night with Assemblywoman Warner, and folks came to talk about how their rent was getting raised in over 55 communities. The other way you earn support is I'm going to follow up on that issue in the town of Milton, and by delivering for people is how you earn trust.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And the next question is for you. If elected, what is your plan for soliciting input from your constituents on the complex issues that come before the Senate?
So great jumping off point where I left it last. First and foremost, being accessible in the district. And we're not waiting until election, until next year to start that. We've held 3 open forum town hall meetings where anybody has been welcome. There's been no pre-screened questions. And we've talked about things from disability to unemployment difficulties to transit to a number of things that affect the community and water quality. So being accessible. We did a town hall meeting on the government side with Cynthia Young of Malta, Laura Garant of Moreau, and Assemblywoman Warner to talk about affordability, to hear people's concerns, to make sure that we're actually doing the right thing, and also to share ideas. So first and foremost, being accessible to the public, but I also do want to put in place citizen advisory councils, bring leaders in. I know first and foremost that on the immigration issue, I'm going to ask Sarah to lead our Immigration Citizens Advisory Committee because I know she's an expert and I want to have that input because I know what I don't know. So in all those areas, I want to find an expert in our community that can help me in every area because there's 330,000 people in this district and every single person knows something that I don't. And it would be foolish to think that I'm there to represent myself. I want all of the input possible so that I can do the best job possible because the role of the senator is a conduit, not someone to rule over people or decide for them.
Thank you, Patrick. Sarah?
Constituent services is the biggest part of this job. I mean, what is any of us here for except to represent the will of the people? And that will isn't just expressed in the ballot box. It's expressed at not just at public forums or town halls. It's my aim to be the type of representative that goes to my constituents rather than expecting them to come to me, which is often what happens in Albany. And it's difficult and it's tricky, but it's largely also a staffing priorities issue. I think a lot of this can be solved by making sure that you have people who are competent, who, when you're unavailable, are able to take the concern, relay it back, and then you can deliberate as a team and have a proper response. Not endless empty inboxes, or empty responses, or auto responses from elected representatives. That is not reflective of my leadership style. I'm very much in the responsive style of government, and that's always where I have found on the school board and in other places, and even in running for office, I've proactively gone out and sought opinions from people who maybe can't even vote in the Democratic primary, but whose concerns I need to elevate now when I'm running. And so that's the type of leadership that you can expect from me. I will be out seeking input rather than expecting to be told what the issues are.
Okay. Thank you. And Patrick, you want just give us a sec here. Janet, when you're ready. Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
So this is another area where I believe our campaign truly stands out because not only have we not waited to start soliciting that input, we've also hired with an eye towards governing. Every member of this campaign staff is attached to this district, from this district, and with the exception of our treasurer, who is still the Saratoga County treasurer, able to vote in this district and has a direct stake in whether or not Jim Tedisco wins or not. So we have hired with an eye towards governing so that those that help us win are those that will help us govern. We haven't hired expensive out-of-district consultants or consulting firms. We have focused on developing talent within the community. So not only are we prepared to win, we are prepared to govern. And the people that you see on our campaign today are the people that you will see in our Senate office next January.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And Sarah, the next question is for you. Recently, Governor Hochul announced New York State is opting into a federal tax credit scholarship program that provides dollar-for-dollar tax credits to taxpayers who donate to private school scholarships. Do you support school choice initiatives such as the school voucher program and the federal tax credit scholarship program?
Without a doubt, our public school system needs help. Voucher programs or scholarship programs or whatever you want to call them that take help away per pupil dollars Even the way that this particular program is being branded would take per pupil dollars away from public schools. That's not to say that choice isn't important. It's to say that choice doesn't have to happen at the expense of our public school system. I am proud to say that I was educated in public schools. My children are being educated in public schools. I've served on the board of education of public schools. They are the bedrock of civic education and of a functioning democracy. And I think we need to take a very careful look at any program that would route dollars away from that system and into the hands of either private interests, corporate interests in the name of choice. So we need to look very carefully at this. This is an issue where I would be at odds with the governor's position. And I'm very open to hearing from education professionals and leaders in the school districts within the 44th who have a stake in the matter.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
Can I ask you to repeat the question?
Absolutely. Recently, Governor Hochul announced New York State is opting into a federal tax credit scholarship program that provides dollar-for-dollar tax credits to taxpayers who donate to private school scholarships. Do you support school choice initiatives such as school voucher programs and the federal tax credit scholarship program?
Thank you. So we received this question from a constituent at our town hall in Schenectady, and I'm going to give the same answer tonight that I gave then. No.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And you're up for the next question. Overall, energy costs are rising. How should New York State work to keep the cost of electricity affordable? And do you support legislation that requires any further price increases to be ratified by the state legislature?
So this is one of the biggest challenges we're facing. We've had conversations across the village of Stillwater and the district about the tripling of some utility rates, including in our small businesses, which are struggling to stay in business as it is. And when you go from $500 to $1,500 a month, it threatens to put you out of business. And that really declines our quality of life. So we could have prevented some of this. There was a bill called Build Public Renewables, and there was a proposal to build 15 gigawatts of renewable energy, and it was only authorized for 5.5. I was advocating with the governor to build more. If we had had that supply now, rates would be lower now. This is the cost of not treating climate change like the crisis that it is. I believe the legislature does need to take a larger role when it comes to regulating prices, but not just prices, also profits. There's a bill by Senator Jim Skoufis that would take profits for utilities from 10% down to 4%. I don't even know why it should be that high, given that they are state-sanctioned monopolies with no competition. It's kind of obscene that they're able to profit off of us when they don't have to be subjected to market forces, but we'll set that aside. So what we need to do to reduce the cost of energy is generate more energy here so that when the Strait of Hormuz is closed or natural gas prices go up, we're able to produce energy here in New York. The sun shines on here regardless of whether or not the president engages in stupid wars. The rivers flow, the wind blows. We should take full advantage of that. And that's why I support expanding the Build Public Renewables program.
Thank you, Patrick. Sarah?
The cost of living issues are very, very real for all of us. I'm still paying back some student loans. I too have lived in insecure housing, have relied on food security teams to eat. And I know that from gas prices to groceries, it's not just the utilities costs that are impacting us. And when utilities go up just 50 to 100, never mind 200, 300, 400, something else has to go. And increasingly, it's becoming unclear where to find that money. One thing that the state can do is be a is create, this is another Skoufis plan, right? A utilities watchdog, make sure that the state is paying attention to those rate hikes. We had a missed opportunity in the HEAT Act this session to put a cap on utility bills as a percentage of income. That's something that it deserves a second look next session. We also need to invest in the future. the future of clean, renewable energy while we're trying to figure this out. Union-built infrastructure for future clean energy sources, whether it's wind, solar, or even nuclear, we need to investigate all different non-fossil fuel oriented types of alternative energy sources in order to lower those rates and keep an eye on the corporations jacking the prices up.
Thank you, Sarah. And so you're up for the next question. And the next 5 questions are related to the rapid growth of data centers in New York State, because people have some concerns. So the first one is, how will you balance the growth of AI-driven data centers demand with New York's climate goals and grid capacity limits?
Yeah, there's really no balance here, and that's why a moratorium needs to be signed by the governor. It passed the legislature, 1-year moratorium. She has the power to make it even longer. This is something that we really need, not just a pause, but a full stop. Other municipalities are making that choice. I think there was a community in Southern California that made a permanent ban on moratoriums because these data centers, we have no idea what the longevity, well, actually we do. Studies are showing that this industry is going to be a bubble, just like many other bubbles we have seen in the past. And when that bubble bursts, the data center of today becomes the shuttered Kmart of tomorrow, right? And so the CLCPA, the Climate Protection Act rollbacks don't help. And data center construction do not help us get back to those goals. And so we need to be as aggressive as possible to on the state and local level to make sure that our communities stay not only climate resilient, but also noise free, pollution free, and that we aren't inviting energy goblins to build in our backyards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
So the moratorium is a time-buying step. It exists so that this legislature can get together and develop the proper regulations for these. And I think I wish something like this could become permanent, but if you understand anything about how Albany works, the lobbyists are going to get in there, the campaign contributions are going to start flowing, and eventually there will be data centers in New York. So we need to use the time that we have efficiently to make sure that we're crafting regulations. And in terms of balancing, as you talked about, ratepayers have to come first. That means there may need to be different tiered energy costs for these high consuming data centers versus what you and I pay so that they're paying the premium. There's proposals to make sure that they have to generate their own energy and they have to use energy that's consistent with the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, as they're building these things. I do think we do need strong regulations because as someone who's worked with AI researchers, the things that I have seen that have blown my mind, saliva-based Alzheimer's tests, MRI reading algorithms that can tell whether it's a primary brain tumor or a tumor that's metastasized from somewhere else in the body. These are tremendous, but they can run on hardware that I pretty much have here. They do not require these massive data centers. They are what I call chef's knives of AI. They're perfect. They're good tools for a particular purpose, as opposed to a Swiss Army knife, which tries to solve all your problems. That's what the data centers need for these large language models. But if you've ever tried to make your dinner with a Swiss Army knife, you know you want the right tool for a job, not something that's trying to solve all your problems in one go.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And the next question about the same topic is, as data centers expand, digital privacy is a major concern. What safeguards will you support to prevent government agencies from accessing private cloud stored data without due process?
Well, we have to continue to protect the free speech right to encryption and make sure that that isn't fractured. There are proposals in states like California that are going after like banning versions of Linux. We need to be able to own our data and own our operating systems to make sure that we can take steps to protect our own data, and that can't come under threat. We need to ban things like surveillance pricing, which the Attorney General is working on, so that our data isn't used to abuse us when we go to try to buy groceries. But yes, we should own our data. If it's being used to target us, if it is ours, if we have generated it, it also goes into the large language models. The artists that have created these works of art that have now trained Claude and ChatGPT deserve compensation for what's been stolen from us, just like we deserve compensation from Facebook and Instagram and Google for making money off of what is a personal asset to us. So I believe in making the individual an owner of our personal data. We have the right to have it deleted, similar to what the European Union has done. I also believe in the area of AI, we have a right to talk to a human being, and we have a right to have the decisions that affect our lives made by human beings. And I want to put a number of these things in the New York State Constitution so that they cannot be taken away from us or threatened.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Sarah?
So first, we need the ability to lock down our data before due process even becomes a question in terms of how other people are able to access it. And we're talking about data from multiple sources, not just medical data, although that's increasingly important, especially for kids who are seeking gender affirming care. That is a massive issue with complicated tiers of privacy, right? So when we're talking about our own data, making sure that the state is paying attention to all the data access points where other third parties can access sensitive information about people, and making sure that there's proper oversight, especially among state agencies and within the government itself. Another big issue here for me that we've been talking about a lot on the faculty at Albany Law School is the use of data to surveil people for law enforcement purposes. A lot can go wrong when your private information is used for law enforcement without due process protections. And so making sure that our laws are strong in that area, that there are burdens of proof established and clear for different data streams. It's, again, getting into the nitty-gritty of where the law meets the road and making sure that the law actually protects the people it's intended to protect.
Thank you, Sarah. And the next question is for you, and it kind of touches on what you were just saying. How will you help ensure that the growth of AI-driven data centers does not lead to expanded state surveillance capabilities?
That sort of building off the last answer. The state can self-regulate when it comes to those types of things. We saw this happen in the immigration space, where the state government can act to place restrictions around what data is gathered and shared and communicated to third parties. Those regulations sometimes have to happen on a department by department basis. For example, will the Department of Homeland Security be sharing with the Department of Health? We had this issue back when I practiced immigration law in Texas. I was concerned that people paying their taxes to the IRS in order to live as law-abiding as they could, even if they didn't have immigration status, would that information be communicated to the Department of Homeland Security for deportation purposes, just their identity and their address and where they work? And at the time, the IRS made commitments that no, if you're putting money into the IRS, we will not share that information. And there are actually statutes written, and I had to trigger one of them because I was personally subpoenaed for information that I had about a client on a child abuse issue that someone was trying to get at that information. We need stronger laws to protect data from all other areas, not just criminal justice, but all other areas as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick?
So limits on data usage have their place, but we also need to be looking at limits on data collection to begin with, because it can't be used against us if it doesn't exist. And this is the deployment that we're seeing of these flock cameras. Now, I was in high school and we read 1984, and it was told to us that it was dystopian to be constantly surveilled everywhere we go by a government that knew our whereabouts at all time. And now we see localities that are starting to deploy these to attempt to do just that. So I think in terms of protection, we should be banning these things. I'm not against all surveillance. I mean, certainly we have some cameras in the playgrounds here in the village of Stillwater and on public property, because if something gets damaged, We want to know why, but there's a big difference between making sure that someone, who broke the slide at Major Dickinson Park and constantly surveilling people down every street and on every part of our cities. So we need to make sure that the data collection, the data surveillance problem is stopped at the source so that it's already an invasion of privacy to track me or anyone else and their whereabouts if you don't have probable cause that I might be committing a crime. You cannot just be collecting this information full stop. This was the same issue with FISA and the NSA. It's like they were capturing who people were calling, how long those calls were, and text messages. This needs to be stopped and privacy needs to be protected. Don't give the government that tool and then they can't abuse it.
Thank you, Patrick. And the next question is for you. Do you support requiring data center operators to disclose when they receive government requests for user data? And if not, why not?
I mean, more than disclose, I don't want to see it happening. We need to, obviously, law enforcement does need tools in certain situations to track somebody down, but it's few and far between. What we need is protections for people, especially now that we're seeing a weaponization of the federal government to attack otherwise law-abiding people for having paperwork out of order. We should remember that immigration law, with all of it's being talked about, is civil law. It's like a parking ticket. It's having paperwork out of order. It is not a crime, and it's not a sign of danger, as was talked about earlier. So yeah, I would support not only notice, but also very high safeguards to ensure that that doesn't happen unless it's an extreme circumstance where it's actually needed. We are being way too fast and loose with this.
Thank you, Patrick. And Sarah?
Anytime corporations and governments are sharing information and doing so outside of the public eye, it typically means that something wrong is happening. We saw that happen in the case of DocGo when New York City, under Mayor Adams, under a declared state of emergency around people moving, ended up issuing a $465 million no-bid contract to a company that had absolutely no business moving people around New York State, never mind claiming to provide them with any sort of minimum health care and housing whatsoever. And we have rules on the books called Freedom of Information law rules, right? Where you, as a citizen, you can request that information, but that means you have to know that that information exists in the first place and that you know how to go about accessing it. For something as sensitive as our own information and our government, in order to keep and maintain government trust, we need government transparency around this issue in particular, so that someone in Arizona isn't accessing our information from New York because it went through a data center in Albany. These are the types of things that I would keep an eye on in the Senate if I were entrusted with your vote.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And this might have already been touched on, but this is the last question on that topic. Do you support the recently passed one-year moratorium on data centers over 20 megawatts until the state completes a grid impact study? And if so, why would you support it? And if not, what safeguards would you put in place instead?
I support it and then some. I mean, when do we see the study? I don't think the moratorium should lift until that study is revealed, and then some. Whenever we allow the government to set a triggering event on something that the vast majority of people do not support, it gives corporations the opportunity to wiggle in there, to find ways to influence the report that ultimately issues. We have to make sure that we are keeping a very careful, very mindful eye on this. A moratorium is a start. We're not missing out in the state of New York by pumping the brakes just a little bit and then studying and paying attention. It would be a tough sell for me to find a site anywhere in Senate District 44 where people would invite a data center in. And so this issue is going to be one where I will be keeping an extremely watchful eye on how things unfold, what the government promises, and then what it actually delivers to folks. And then layering on additional accountability if it's not what was promised, or if we discover that it was subjected to undue influence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah and Patrick.
Yeah, we've covered this. I'm definitely supportive. The grid impact study, I can tell you what the impacts in the grid are going to be. We have one of the oldest electrical grids in the country, badly in need of upgrades. We are facing really high utility rates, so adding more draw on the grid, the laws of supply and demand, if you increase demand without increasing supply, the price goes up. We had a brownout in the village of Stillwater not too long ago. It wasn't caused by this, but I don't want to see more of them where half the house works and the other half of the house doesn't, especially as we face really high summer heat or cold winters. There's not a good place for these things, and I think this slowing down is important. But we need to craft proper regulations for not only data centers, but what data centers are facilitating, which are these AI models that these billionaires want to use to replace human beings. So that when you call a health insurance company, it won't be a person on the other end of the line. It will be an algorithm. And for a health insurance company, a frustrated customer who gives up and a satisfied customer are almost the same thing. They would almost rather you give up. We've seen algorithms used to mass deny claims at United Health, not because they weren't qualified, but because that the process of proving that they were qualified would be so frustrating that most of them would give up. These are being used in a pernicious and dangerous fashion. So not only do we need to stop the data centers to make sure we're protecting the environment, we need to protect the people from what these algorithms and these systems will allow the wealthy and the powerful to do. And we understand they do not have our best interest at heart.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And you get the next question. This is simple. Why should voters give you their vote?
Oh, it's simple, but there's so much to it. So what we've heard tonight is a lot of vigorous agreement, and it's to be understandable. We're both progressive Democrats. The vision and the direction we want to take the state doesn't vary very much at all. What does vary is our preparedness and our competence to do the job as a former Assembly and Senate staffer. As someone who has set up a first-term Senate office, I am ready to hit the ground running to make sure we maintain constituent services and begin delivering on the much needed upgrades around our district that our senator has not gotten us resources for. And I would say that as a progressive Democrat in a Republican community, as one of the most productive members of the New York State Democratic Committee when I served, despite being not aligned with either governor I served under, whether that was Andrew Cuomo or Kathy Hochul, I still got some of the most resolutions passed of any member. That I am the kind of candidate that gives us the best chance of beating Jim Tedisco. Because I've done it before, I've moved voters in 2020. That is the high watermark of any Democrat seeking to represent Saratoga County at 47.5% of the vote. I believe I am more than 3% better than I was 6 years ago. And so I'm asking the voters in this Democratic primary to trust me with the nomination so that I can help deliver for this district what we've needed for a long time, which is a productive and effective Democrat or productive and effective senator that shares our values and can deliver for us in Albany.
Okay, thank you, Patrick and Sarah.
Yeah, I come to this position and to this effort with an eye towards servant leadership. I'm here to serve. I'm not here for a job. I'm not here for a paycheck. In fact, I think I'd be taking a pay cut, but if I'm entrusted with this service and the obligations that attach to it, and I'm glad to do that because I am a bit of an outsider when it comes to the political scene structurally in terms of party politics and the types of things that people are really tired of. The structure is broken. We need something different, not something different like Trump, something different like a hockey mom with deep experience in law and policy who has passed bills, who has offered suggestions, who has brought people with disparate beliefs around a kitchen table and got us to agree on something. These are the types of skills that are necessary. We also need someone who is a team builder and a team leader. This doesn't just happen on its own. It's not about the personality in the office, except to the extent that there are differing leadership skills involved. And I've successfully run teams, justice-oriented teams. I'm currently running one now while I'm running a campaign to make sure that we are all focused towards one goal, and that's justice for everyone under our care. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We have 2 questions left that are just simple yes or no's. And so, Sarah, I'll ask you first. Do you think that New York State should increase the deposit on all bottles containing drinks?
Yes.
Okay. And Patrick?
Yes.
Okay. And then Patrick, should the state require that bottles be made of readily recyclable materials?
Hell yes.
And Sarah?
Yes.
Okay. So that is all of the questions that we have from the community. So we're going to move on to your closing statements. And you each have 1 minute for your closing statement. Please remember not to challenge your opponents directly or indirectly. And closing remarks are intended to present your platform and outline your intended goals. And the first speaker will be Sarah.
Thank you. My goal for running for public office is simple. I want to be of service. And my team is more than a coalition. We're building a vision for how New Yorkers can serve each other. I'm humbled by the support that this vision has received from important organizations like the Working Families Party and labor organizations representing electricians and healthcare workers, among others. I'm also a gun sense candidate. And I am blown away by the endorsement that over 350 of you in this district have given by contributing financially to our campaign and allowing us to exhaust the public finance match as of yesterday. I don't take this trust for granted. I carry it with care. And it would be the privilege of a lifetime to represent you in the state Senate. Thank you.
And Patrick.
Healthcare is a human right. It is not a privilege, and it is not a product to be sold on the market. It is the fundamental element of care in our society. It is infrastructure, and it is far, far past time for this country and indeed this state to guarantee that right to everyone. Climate change is an existential threat, and we must meet it head on. We should not be taking a step back along with Washington, D.C. When Washington steps back, New York needs to step up. We deserve a life of dignity, no matter what job we perform, whether we deliver your groceries, whether we scoop your ice cream, whether we teach law or work in a university, or indeed serve in public office. Each of us is entitled to a life of dignity. The path forward to making that happen for the 44th Senate District runs through November and runs through beating Senator Jim Tedisco so that we can have an advocate who believes these things and can help shape things in the future to make all of our lives better. I am here because I am that candidate that can give us a chance to do something that hasn't happened in 40 years through 2-wave elections. Please trust me with your vote. Thank you.
I want to thank both of you, Sarah and Patrick, for participating in this event and helping to educate voters. I also want to thank the public for submitting the questions and all the viewers who have taken the time to watch this event and learn about the candidates. Don't forget to vote. Early voting starts on June 13 and goes through June 21. There are multiple early voting locations within the county. Check your Board of Elections for hours and locations. Election day is Tuesday, June 23rd. Polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. You can find your voting location and information about absentee ballots and early mail ballots by calling the Board of Elections of your county, going on their website, or using the League's vote411.org. Thank you, everyone, and good night.